All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And greetings to all. This is Washington, D.C., live today from the nation's capital. Yes, just a heartbeat from all of your lobbyist money. It's only blocks away from where I sit. Yes, the military-industrial complex. It envelops me like a warm blanket. Washington, D.C. I'm here with Tony today. It is just Tony and myself. It's kind of exciting, Tony, to be you and me. We can just have at it.
I've never seen anything like it.
We're going to have David Cay Johnston in the second hour, though, and talk about any number of things that I think are pertinent in the moment. And one of those things is, I would suggest the wrapping up of the Trump legal cases is something that we were all expecting. The pounding the drum of tariffs as loud and as relentlessly as the Trump people are pounding that drum is something that has already been responded to by Mexico and by some of our allies who may be on the business end of that. So what I will do is talk to David about that, his background in Trump economics and the future is something that, of course, he's detailed in a lot of his books about that world. I will start with things that are not related to politics, but we do obviously find ourselves in an intensely political time with a news cycle that is breaking news it would seem, every few minutes, and it's one story after another that does, sort of remain front and center to the degree that it demands our attention. So we will continue to handle all that stuff as it happens, but I don't want to just be defined by politics. I love that so many are here on this wonderful week of Thanksgiving, and I do want to start this show by thanking our audience, because our audience started as just a handful of people who knew us from KGO Radio, a terrific legacy radio station in San Francisco. We were dominant through the Bay Area, through Northern California, and had a reputation nationally. And we were the victims, was KGO, of the same thing that is swallowing up AM stations, particularly talk radio stations all over the country. Isn't that right, Tony? I mean, you've seen it too.
Yeah.
We're living it at iHeartRadio right now. So as KGO went away, we migrated to the YouTube platform, and then we feed this show out live every day on YouTube between 2 and 4 in the East, between 11 and 1 in the West, and beyond that to all the audio platforms where people can listen on podcasts. So that's just to give you, 90 seconds of background, and now to the fact that we've grown the audience. And when I say we've grown it, I really mean you, the audience, have helped us grow this show so that more and more people have found out about it. And we do a number of things on this show that we think you aren't going to necessarily see in a mainstream media environment. And we also take stuff from mainstream media. We comment it, we share it with you. We will share stuff from other podcasts if we think it's worthy. And we love the input of the audience and the community that has grown up here on this platform. So I want to thank you for sharing the show the way you do. It costs you nothing to share it, but when you share a segment or a comment or even a suggestion that people should check the show out, people find their way here. And it's allowed us to build our subscriber base to 75,000. And, that may not seem like a lot when you compare it to, these huge podcasts. But for us, that's a massive climb and a huge lift. And when the show started, as is noted in the chat right now, we just had 1,000, 2,000. We were hoping to make it to 10,000. It took a while. And so for us at 75,000, it's a big day. And I really appreciate everybody's help in making it happen. So thank you, everyone.
It's huge,
again,
man.
It's very, very cool.
Get you your little. We're gonna get you the YouTube plaque. We're going 100K.
YouTube,
we got to get it,
100K. Wow, it seems like who knows. Thank you, Mars, who is one of our provocateurs in our chat. Thank you for a $5 super chat. And Mars, we go nuts with you, and you go nuts with us. But we sure appreciate. I like the conversation every day, and as you know, when someone is in the chat disagreeing with me, and it's in what I think is a substantive way, I'll try to get right to it. And if it's not a substantive way, I'll try to get right to it also, but it'll be a different kind of response. So anyway, I think Mars oftentimes will disagree with what's being said on the show or the way something is being represented. So it's always fun, for me anyway, to have an opposing opinion. And I'm coming to you from my parents' house. My dad passed away, as many of you know, a few months ago. And so this is the first holiday season without my father, and I mention it in the context of disagreements because right here in this space is where my father would run like the McLaughlin group every night. I mean, it's Washington, D.C. We grew up in a politically informed family, and my sister was and is brilliant. I think the two girls in my family, there are two boys and two girls. The two girls are insanely smart. And to my one sister and I used to go at it. And and because it was sibling rivalry and she was so much smarter than I was, and I knew that she was so much smarter than I was, I would deliberately take the opposing side, no matter how ridiculous, just to get under her skin. And as I sit here at this table and talk to you, I just think back on all of those conversations, and as I say, it really was like the McLaughlin group. It was like any fiery conversation where you had to have your facts and you had to be, and all of that over the meal, So it happened right here in this space, and it's a lot of fun to come back to this hallowed ground. And so
the Mark Thompson Show.
I have to put my credibility glasses on. For maximum, you can see they do give me another sort of patina of credibility. Patina's a ding word. Ron Cook, thank you for a $20 super sticker. Wow, that's really, really cool. And Ron, don't I have a thank you?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if you can hear the drops. I have my miniature drop machine, and it sometimes comes in not as loud. But I do my best to get these drops to you, to give you the full droppage that you definitely do deserve as a show listener and someone who's donating. So, Ron, I hope you appreciate it. So now,
the Mark Thompson Show.
I like to start with things that are not political on the show. And so it is with the some degree of sadness that I'd like to report to you that the world's oldest man, John Tinniswood, has passed away. Anybody know? Anybody want to guess how old John Tinniswood was? The oldest man established in the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest man. He lived in Southport, Northwest England. I'm telling you these things while you may jump into the chat and you can tell me 112 is John Watson is correct. It is 112.
I mean, I did put it on the screen at first. Sorry.
Jeez. That is so weak. So now look at everybody. Daniel Martin, 112. Yeah, great. Tony's told you. So 112. There he is. Guy, he looks good. He looks really good. So he is the world's oldest man, and he became the world's oldest man back in April following the death of a 114-year-old Venezuelan guy named Juan Vicente Perez. And it is said his last day was surrounded by music and love. All those who cared about him over the years, we thank. Born the same year as the Titanic sinking and living through both world wars, he said that the secret to his longevity was whoring around, is what he said. No, he didn't say that. He said pure luck. He advised moderation, actually, in all things, just the opposite of the decadence that you are drawn to. He said, if you drink too much, this is a quote, or you eat too much, or you walk too much, if you do too much of anything, you're going to suffer eventually. There is moderation in all things, he notes. There he is, that handsome devil. So he passes away, the oldest man, John Tinniswood, at the age of 112. Rest in peace, my friend.
The Mark Thompson Show.
There is panic in space right now. And I will get to Donald Trump. I will get to dark money in his cabinet. I'll also get to Democratic payoff before a softball interview. I'll get to that. There's a controversy on the Democrat side of things as well. But I'll get to all of that in a moment. First, panic in space. It is true that there is a radiation hazard that they're worried about on the International Space Station. Astronauts were sent into a panic after a cargo ship arrived. This cargo ship arrived with tons, literally tons of equipment and also food, stuff to keep them alive for the many months that are ahead. So this cargo ship arrived and there was a toxic smell, and they feel that there is some sort of possible contamination in the form of droplets. So this relief vessel, if you will, this cargo vessel, docked with the Russian module that's a part of the space station, right? There's an American part and a Russian part. And the crew quickly strapped into protective equipment and activated an extra air scrubbing system on board their segment of the International Space Station for about 30 minutes. They noticed the smell immediately when they opened the hatch. NASA astronaut Don Pettit also reporting some spray paint-like smell in the Node 3 module of the U.S. segment of the ISS. They don't know if it originated from the cargo ship or not. Space station air scrubbers, this is a quote, and containment and contaminant sensors monitored the station's atmosphere following the observation, and flight controllers determined air quality inside the space station was at normal levels. The cargo vessel arrived and delivered 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for members of this crew on board the International Space Station. So that is a developing story. Yeah, I'm bouncing back and forth here between screens, but no bueno when you're in space. What was the movie with the movie where they needed to get Tommy Lee Jones and Clint Eastwood and a bunch of old guys to fly into space and rescue? It was like Project. It wasn't like Project Moon or Moon Project, or what was that? Anybody? Tony will have it for us.
Thanks, Tony.
He'll have it. The idea was that, you know, it was, again, like one of those things. It's always the basic premise of any heist movie or any where there are older kind of experienced people involved. It's like, there's no one else who can take this mission except you guys. We have to bring you back into NASA. Space Cowboys. That was it. Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
It was Space Cowboys. Yeah. So they needed to get Tommy Lee Jones, Clint Eastwood, and a couple other old guys, I forget who it was, to go back into space because they had some special set of skills. It's the exact same thing that, you know, brings anybody into one more heist. We just do, you know, I'm out of that. I'm living clean now. Yeah, just do this one more, crack this safe one more time and you'll be done, right? Just this last mission into space to save the universe. So that was that. But anyway, that's there they are, the Space Cowboys. And it was Tommy Lee Jones. Oh, I see, Donald Sutherland. And who's the guy on the left? I don't recognize him. Is that an actual astronaut on the left? It's Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Donald Sutherland, and who's the guy on the left? Anybody? That wasn't in the materials, Tony?
Thanks, Tony.
Hold on, I'm bringing up the IMDb page.
James Garner, thank you, whoever said
James Garner.
Eileen, thank you. God, Eileen bailing Tony out. Space Cowboys, Armageddon, Gravity, Meteor, Lost in Space, Fireballs. Actually, yeah, they all are sort of working on the same premise. Anyway, so that's what's happening in the International Space Station. There are legitimate concerns, but apparently some of those fears are allayed at this hour. And finally, what time is it? It's almost, I have one more minute just to mention this guy. He's a pilot known for animal rescue flights. And in the Catskills, I guess he ran into some funky weather or something. He's only 49 years old. His plane went down. And the plane crash in New York State's Catskill Mountains, which happened on Sunday, claimed his life and the life, I believe, of one or two of the dogs he was transporting. He's known for flying these dogs that are in need of shelter and care to various accepting facilities. I mean, he's really like, one of those heart of gold type guys. And he... apparently, first responders, including sheriffs and state forest rangers, state police, and local firefighters, got to the crash site quickly, and sadly, they found him having had this incident costing him his life. They did find a deceased dog, one animal survivor, a Labrador mix suffering from 2 broken legs, and there was a third dog that was missing, but the injured dog was taken to the veterinary hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. And they found, I believe, the third dog, and that has also been rescued. So again, to me, and that's why we wanted to show you the picture and do the story. He's one of the, the good stories and one of the good people that is still out there doing good work. And so sadly, he loses his life in pursuit of that work, but nonetheless, a great. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, there is controversy, and I'll get to the controversy around Donald Trump's cabinet, and of course we'll touch on it with David Cay Johnston. But one of the things that we did put up in our chat, and we put up that we asked you what your favorite Trump merch was when he came out with the guitars. And he's had the guitars, he's had the NFTs, he's had the sneakers, he's had. What else? The coin, of course.
The Bible?
The Bible. Oh, my God. Yes, thank you. The Bible. And every other manner of grift and a cheese that one could imagine. But the guitar was such like it was almost semi-cool in its own cheesy, grifty way. And so it may come as no surprise that there was some blowback from the people that actually came up with the design for that guitar that was then copied by the Trump guitar people in that production line. Here's a TikTok to kind of tell you where he's been given a cease and desist on it.
We have some breaking news right now. Donald Trump tried to sell Trump guitars, but now he just got hit with a cease and desist letter from the guitar manufacturer who says that the Trump guitars violate trademark law. So let's break this down. Donald Trump is now selling Trump guitars as a way to make some extra money before taking office in January. And Gibson, the manufacturer of this type of guitar, sent cease and desist letters to the owner of Trump guitars, which is called 16 Creative. The cease and desist letters specifically target the Gibson guitar models that 16 Creative is using for Trump. Now, these guitars aren't owned by Donald Trump, but they are pitched as, quote, the only guitars endorsed by President-elect Donald Trump. I just think it's hilarious that anyone associated with Donald Trump right now is literally getting hit with cease and desist letters left and right, and this is for a Trump grift. And it really tracks what we saw on the campaign trail, where a number of musicians actually sent cease and desist letters trying to shut down Donald Trump's campaign for using their music. In any event, comment your thoughts, spread the word, and follow along, stay up to date on all the news.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. And that is indeed the state of the state. Now, Tony, who is a guitar and rock and roll guitar aficionado, he will tell you that while this is a derivative design, that is, it's a Gibson.
It's a Les Paul design, but like everybody does a copy of it. Here's Hohner's guitar, here's oh dang it, Ibanez made one as well. Oh shoot, give me a second, I just killed my screen. Another company called Zemitis,
see.
Zamitis is on my list of guitars to get. Like, look, it's that bottom
really
cutout.
Cool. They're really
you know?
cool looking. Yeah, but you're saying, look, that's a Gibson design overall.
Here's the Ibanez.
Right.
You know, here's Gretsch Duo Jet. It's like, yes.
So your point
everybody makes a Les Paul copy. Like reputable, normal, like Ibanez, Gretsch. These are like big manufacturers make Les Paul copies.
Why don't they leave poor Donald Trump alone? Propman 415 says that leave him alone. He's way above the law. Exactly. I mean, what has to happen before you guys all realize that Trump cannot be stopped and he can do whatever he wants? Trump selling guitars is blasphemy. I doubt he knows anything about guitars or music, for that matter, says Hanan. Yeah, of course. He knows about money. And I loved it in that little TikTok. It said, Trump was selling guitars so he could make a little extra money before he gets in as president. A little extra money? Is that what this is? A little extra money? You mean selling White House favors wasn't bringing enough?
I don't think the guitars are bringing him that much money, honestly.
Right. Yeah, I think $10K a guitar isn't going to get it done. Or
is that how much they are?
Guitar. No, I don't know how much they are.
Oh God.
I just said
Okay.
That. No, I mean, but let's say they're 100K. It doesn't matter. I mean, so, but that's the situation. He's been given a cease and desist. We'll have to see if that indeed, holds
what
up.
Gibson will do to protect their design. But again, everybody makes a copy.
No,
this is nothing new. It's a limited run and it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but it's a big eagle on that guitar. I'll say that.
There is if you're MAGA, that's a great guitar for you. So you may want to jump on.
It's lacking in red. That's all I can say.
Yeah, maybe a little more red. Yeah, maybe
they should
that.
at least put the headstock red or something. They should have gone with that.
Dear
lazy,
MAGA bosses,
lazy
please more red in the next iteration of the guitar. There is rivalry in Trump land. I have
The Mark Thompson Show.
Boris Epshteyn is accused of asking potential administration nominees to pay a monthly fee for lobbying Donald Trump if you want to get into the cabinet or be in Trump's orbit. Now, this guy, Boris Epshteyn, you may know him if you watch, and I don't think, well, I mean, you might have happened on this. He was the Sinclair Broadcasting political analyst, among other things. He's a hedge fund guy, I think. But he's very close to the Trumps. Okay, so you have to know that this guy who didn't have a role in the administration per se is still like a Trump whisperer. Okay, so he is, because of that, granted access and a kind of communication and closeness to Trump that could be of benefit to any number of people. So apparently, if you want to say the palace guard is encircling him. There's an ouster effort over accusations that he asked potential administration nominees to pay monthly consulting fees in exchange for lobbying for them to Trump. And what I recall, it's not a lot of money. He was asking for like 10 grand a month or something like that. So anyway, apparently, Epshteyn suggested that the money be paid, and David Warrington, the Trump 24 campaign general counsel, finalized the conclusions of a review into Epshteyn and found that he had unsuccessfully solicited tens of thousands of dollars from potential nominees, including Scott Bessent, who is the new Treasury Secretary, or at least nominated to be such. And according to the review, one day after Trump met with Bessent for the first time in February, Epshteyn invited Bessent to lunch at a hotel in Palm Beach, and that's where he asked for a monthly retainer of at least $30,000 to promote his name at Mar-a-Lago in case Trump won the election. So all of this is going on before Trump is in, but with a view toward the fact that when Trump gets in, everything's going to happen pretty quickly. So, get your money down fast. Now, Bessent said no to that, and then he complained about it. And he said essentially, hey, look, this dude tried to shake me down for money to get this appointment and get close to Trump. And when Epshteyn asked Bessent to invest $10 million in a 3x3 basketball league, he declined, but, and according to published reports here, told associates that Epstein would probably give him better access if he had taken up investment into the 3x3 basketball league, invested the $10 million. So the review into Epstein is a longtime Trump advisors wield outside influence, they suggest, with Trump over cabinet picks and positions in key departments, also concluded that Epstein's employment and access to Trump should be terminated. This is according to two people who were briefed on these findings. Again, this comes out of The Guardian. But Epstein remained part of Trump's inner circle as of this week and as of last night. Trump riding high on the news, of course, that the special counsel prosecutors moved to dismiss the two federal criminal cases against him. And he credits some of that to Epstein. And so you see what I was saying before, Epstein with a really tight relationship with the Trumps. Add to that, now getting credit for wrapping up Trump's legal headache, although I'd suggest to you that was somewhat academic. It was going to happen anyway. But Epstein may be a tough guy to oust, regardless of kind of what he's accused of. So, in any case, and by the way, I'll just remind everybody that Epstein was involved in the scheme to overturn the government on January 6th. He was involved in the scheme to produce fake electors. He was involved in so much of the Trumpian world of an attempted coup the first time. So he's been a loyal Trump guy for a long time. And now, even though he finds himself in the center of controversy, I mean, it's in a way on brand for Trumpland to sort of be selling access. And let's all, I'll finish my thought and then I'll put it in context. But it's sort of on brand for that. I mean, there's a corrupt core of the Trump plan, which I'd suggest is very much served by these kinds of stories, and you'll see way more of them. I think we saw it in the first round of Trump presidency 1.0 when he was president. Of three of his cabinet officials had to resign over clear corruption and corruption investigations. And then you end up with, as I say, Trump himself sort of creating an atmosphere that might be open to corruption. But the point I was going to make is that, look, in Washington, where I sit today, there is always a sense of those closest to the president have access and are granted favors in any numbers of ways. However, there's certain guidelines and certain basic guardrails that are in place that are sort of accepted and customary. They're not law always. And so that allows for a lot of these grifters and those who are close to a corrupt president to make money. And it's a pay-to-play type administration. But that's sort of where we sit today. There is also news out of the Trump administration.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And I say the Trump administration because apparently he's the president now. I mean, it really is the only word that's getting out. He's screaming it from the rooftops. And in this generally quiet period during the holidays, I guess the loudest screaming gets the most attention. And the stuff he's screaming about is associated with policy on the economy. He has pledged now that soon after taking office, I should say, he will slap steep tariffs on Mexico and Canada, two of America's closest allies. Also China, of course. It was always China that was head of the parade, but now he throws in Mexico and Canada. And he plans to follow through, it's suggested, on these very draconian, aggressive trade policies. And he posted this on his Truth Social platform and said on the first day of his presidency, he will change American policy towards tariffs, and he'll impose a 25% tariff on all products coming into the U.S. from Mexico and Canada. He also posted that he would throw a 10% tariff on all products that come into the U.S. from China. He didn't specify whether that levy is going to come on his first day in office in the case of China. But there are existing tariffs already, of course, that we've imposed as a nation on Chinese goods. And the statement that was accompanying the Truth Social stuff on Mexico is as follows. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Look, this is a destabilizing economic plan and strategy. I'll talk to David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, about it in the second hour. We've touched on it numerous times. There's a part of Trump, of course, that's obstinate. There's a part of Trump that the more he hears about what a bad idea tariffs are, the more he wants to do it. He is not someone who's cowed by fact. He's not someone who's particularly responsive to any sort of reality. He makes a statement and then he doubles down on it that way. So the intended effect of that, which I'm unclear on, that it's generally it's a protective kind of legislation. It's protective policy. You end up, sure, making American goods more desirable because the price of foreign goods goes up. But here's what I would suggest, and I've made this point before, of course, as have many others, I'm sure. You have now, it's a unified global economy. So many of the component parts in any number of things, from high tech to automobiles, and automobiles have a lot of high tech in them that they didn't used to have, those component parts come from all over the world. And a lot of them come from China. And a lot of the stuff that we have here in this country comes from China. After all, we're China's number one customer. So when you say, I'm going to impose these tariffs, and so you should buy, this American car, let's say, instead of the Chinese vehicle, to use an extreme example, or any bits of technology that contain Chinese parts, well, the increased cost of those parts is passed on to the consumer, and the consumer ends up getting screwed. So, that's not going to matter to Trump, and he'll just tell you how great the economy is. That's his great thing. No matter how hard you're hurting, he'll just tell you how great it is. And, there's never been anything like it. So, but that's his word. On day one, he wants to do these things. Now, the only last thing I'll say on this is people I know who are sort of Trumpies say, oh, Mark, come on. That's the stuff he does just to shake it up. It's all a negotiating ploy. It's all leverage. Okay, we'll see. Somebody commenting in the chat. There it is. Tony had his Truth Social post. There it is. Yeah, but I just pretty much gave it all to you. But there it is. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Nice prayer flag. I don't know what they are, but I don't. This background behind me, I didn't even inspect it. So it's just This is just the family as everybody's coming in. But having said that, I love the environment. Great to be home here in Washington, D.C. Smash the like button if you would, just because I need to remind you of that, and I wanted to remind you. And I also have another big story.
The Mark Thompson Show.
That I wanted to share with you. This is a, look, you can always say it's too soon to go over the ashes of the election. This is a 5-alarm fire with Trump coming in. How can we talk about anything but this incoming administration? It's not a time to look back. But I actually think that this election, having gone for Trump narrowly, it's getting more narrow by the hour, as you know. This is nothing of a mandate. That's the most ridiculous thing. But I will say that their screaming mandate, and they do have, all three chambers, if you will, both chambers on the Hill, and they have the executive branch. And of course, the Supreme Court is a concierge Supreme Court that Trump has put in place. So I don't know if there's a mandate, but there certainly is a power base. But that said, the election itself that produced that slim victory, we do need to look at what happened. And we do need to understand our country. And I thought it interesting, the campaign that Kamala Harris ran. As you know, I felt that in the short time she had, she actually did very, very well. She's not the person that I would have chosen. She, I feel, is a flawed candidate in many ways that don't have to do with her competence. They have to do with her ability to campaign and audition well. When you campaign and audition well, you're unflappable in a back and forth with whomever is interviewing you. So it doesn't matter if you are on 60 Minutes, Joe Rogan, or The View. You are comfortable enough with where you are in terms of your positions, in terms of what you're going to say, in terms of your messaging, that you're able to handle all those things. Kamala Harris, to me, had a soft spot there. I just thought she wasn't as strong. But listen, it's not easy, okay? It's not. I thought Kamala Harris, and I think Kamala Harris is an impressive person. It's just that I felt she was a flawed candidate. So look, so I hope, because I know I'm going to get angry emails. I always get them when I'm critical at all of Kamala Harris. But I wanted to acknowledge at the same moment, which is what I just did, that she ran, I felt, an extremely energetic and almost flawless campaign from the standpoint of the candidate, from what she was asked to do, given who she is and the limitations that she has. But I always wondered exactly what was going down in her campaign and exactly how decisions were being made on commercials they were running, on different forums in which she was appearing, the issues that they felt they should most underscore, how much of the campaign was attacking Trump, and how much of the campaign was introducing a candidate that most of America didn't know. So when I heard an interview that just dropped with the Kamala Harris people, I thought I'd share just a little bit of it with you. Now, David Plouffe is he's sort of the genius Democratic campaign strategist who went over to the Harris campaign when she entered the race. And he speaks first here, and then I'll share you a little bit more. And we'll talk on the other side of it. But here it is, David Plouffe talking about the campaign.
Kamala Harris started this race, if I recall, with favorable 33 to 35. She ended it at 48. She actually ended the election with a higher approval rating than Donald Trump. I'm not sure someone's won the presidency with a lower approval rating. So I think as people got to know her, they liked her. I think her approval rating now post-election is north of 50. That was really hard work. And I will say that, think about if Kamala Harris had come out of a process that was traditional, running in and winning a primary, so maybe become the nominee March or April. You spend a month, 6 weeks on your biography. You keep coming back to it. You define the Trump first term. You raise the stakes of what a Trump second term would be like. You have like a month just to run paid advertising on things like housing and your tax cut. So this is where there was a price to be paid for the short campaign. And you can't even say 107 days, because to Quentin's point, some of that was spent shoring up the Democratic nomination. Then you really have to have said everything you want to say by the time people start voting early. So we had a little more than 2 months to do bio, contrast on the economy, on healthcare, raising the stakes of Trump. So yes, when you have a race where you've got the current incumbent president with approval ratings of, let's say, 38 to 40, never in history have we had this before, at least since, I guess, Grover Cleveland. So once you have a former president running where 48 to 51% of the people approve of his first term, and people are dissatisfied with the direction of the country, you have to raise the stakes of what a second term would be like. So I think for us, we spent much more time trying to raise the stakes of a second term than re-arbitrating the first, because voters just weren't open to that. So that's why pointing out, his tariff and what that would mean in terms of a huge sales tax for the American people, the fact that he's more unhinged, he wants unchecked power. Project 2025 ended up being about as popular as the Ebola virus. So we did a lot of good work there. And now, of course, the son of a bitch lied about it, and he's hiring everybody who authored it. Project 2025 is going to be the Trump administration agenda, as we pointed out. So we had to do that. So if we had just run a race solely on Kamala Harris positives, though we did a lot of that, on what Kamala Harris wants to do on the economy, we did a lot of that. It's worth reminding your listeners who live in California, or New York, or Alabama, or Florida, you're not experiencing the presidential race as it's experienced in Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina. We spent a lot of time, she spent a lot of time driving a core economic message. But in our view, that was not enough. When you've got someone whose first term was judged favorably enough by enough people to give him the election, and people are dissatisfied about where you are now, and you're part of that administration, you have to basically raised the stakes. And for us, it was on the economy. It was on the fact that all the people who stood in his way last time were warning us about him. It was about Project 2025. It was about abortion. And, I think we did a good job of that based on our data, but we had to stay on that. So I think that is an incredibly faulty reading, that what we should have done is just lift up Kamala Harris. We clearly did. Her favorability rating increased by, I believe, 15 points. If you look at who do you trust more to look out for people like your family, who do you think is going to fight for the middle class? Huge progress for Kamala Harris. Even on crime and immigration, we were able to make double-digit progress. So we were very focused on lifting her up. But to win a race like this, given the political atmospherics, which were quite challenging, we had to raise the risk of a Trump second term.
So that was really, I thought, a really good drill down on what happened. And in that couple of minutes, he reviewed for you the situation they had, which was quite unique in that you had this candidate dropped into the race with 100 odd days left. And I saw in the chat, everybody knew who she was. This guy, it was People's Republic of Santa Monica says everyone knew who she was. She was the VP for 4 years. Well, that's just not true, People's Republic of Santa Monica. She was actually not known to a bunch of the public, and that's not just my opinion. That there were numerous polls that showed you that. So if you follow that bouncing ball at all, you know that that's true. That is to say, the public that is well informed, following politics, of course, you knew who she was, but most of the public didn't. I mean, based on polling, I know it's incredible. She's the vice president. How can you say that? Well, it's true, and it's also true that you can know someone's the vice president and still have no sense of who they are. And I think that's really generally the relationship that Americans have with their vice president. I mean, did you know really much about Mike Pence? Did you know that, he was governor of Indiana? Did you know what he did when he was governor of Indiana? So if he was running, he'd have to establish a lot of sort of the policy blanks that were left out and fill those in, and then you get it. So I thought that was a reasonable point, and he's saying we have to do that while we're concurrently featuring the threat that Donald Trump's second term would be. Everything from Project 2025 to the tariffs and to the immigration issue. So you have to essentially create all of these different messages, and you have to do it in a very compact time period. So, as you know, I felt one of the key decisions that the Trump people made, and it was an effective decision, was to run a commercial that was almost the perfect commercial, because it was she's going to raise your taxes. She supported your taxpayer money being used for trans surgeries for illegals in our prisons. That's all and then there was one of them even had a little piece with Charlemagne the God and her speaking on that podcast. So I thought that was an effective spot. And the counterpunch spot didn't run nationally. It ran in the swing states. But I felt that the Democrats lost some ground because of the effectiveness of that spot. Now, they have actual research on that spot, and they say that actually that spot didn't really affect people in swing states to the extent that I would think. But that said, someone else in this team, and this team that's being interviewed, again, it's not just Pluff. It's now let me give you the it's the main people, the working staff that were working the campaign for Kamala Harris. So you had Pluff, as I mentioned, that Jen O'Malley Dillon, and Quentin Folks, along with Stephanie Cutter. Now, you're not going to hear from all of them, but at least know that those are the real insiders. I mean, this is the top of the mothership that ran Kamala Harris's campaign. Here's a little bit more from the conversation, and they addressed that spot I was talking about as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I think people, when they vote for president, want to vote about
Stop
the future.
1 second, Tony. This does relate to also the need to, and this is something I haven't touched on yet, to individuate, right? To somehow make yourself distinct from the Biden administration, because you know the Biden administration isn't popular, but at the same time, you are part of the administration, and you also want to take credit for some of the stuff that's gone down that's been positive during a Biden administration. So you're in a tough spot. This kind of, I think, relates in part to that. Go ahead, Tony.
And they saw in the vice president someone they didn't know, a lot about a background. So, who she was, what she stood for, what she did as vice president. So in every step of what we were trying to do, we had to tell a pretty robust story in one ad or one policy rollout or one event that you don't often have to do because of the time we were in. But I do think that we really focused from the get-go on how she was different than everyone else, different than Joe Biden, different than Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, the choice was her versus Donald Trump. And at the same time, she was very clear that she was a new generation of leadership, but it wasn't just like a statement. It was, here's what I need to focus on. Her first policy announcements were economic, talking about housing, talking about lowering costs, understanding that people really didn't feel like things were progressing in the way that they wanted to, a la the right track, wrong track data, but how she brought her own point of view to thinking about housing, sandwich generation. That was probably her biggest applause line.
And so you could see that the biggest applause line that they refer to kind of helps them establish an issue that they feel should be concentrated upon. And so that was that. Back to that, Tony, if you would.
Her life and also understanding what people in the country were really needing. So I think that in a 107-day race, it is very difficult to do all the things you would normally do in a year and a half, 2 years. But I think wherever we had an opportunity, the vice president did put her own stamp on this and did it in a deeper way than I think probably we got the kind of full breadth of coverage on it. Of course, when you have an administration that a lot of progress has been made and you're part of that progress, it's complicated when you're asked questions in certain ways. But at the end of the day, I think she really, every time she turned, talked to a voter, every time she was out on the stump, she really leaned into her own vision. But the headwinds were tough. I will also, though, add, of course, we lost. So I'm not here to say that didn't happen. We would much rather not have that happen. But where she campaigned, we did way better than the rest of the country. And Donald Trump did worse, to the point that you were just talking about with Pluff. That idea that people have just a well-constructed, already baked in idea about Trump and they don't need to learn anymore is just complete fallacy. I mean, his numbers are stronger today than they have ever been.
Yeah.
And that was critical for us. And we also believe this race was not just about Kamala Harris. It was Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. And we had to set that choice and that frame up. And I think that we were able to.
That's the key. So they had to address both, and they had to do it in a short time. That's essentially what you're saying. I have one more cut for but I really like this x-raying of what they were thinking, because it makes you realize, these were considered options that these people had. And I also think you have to evaluate the body politic. I don't know that this is a winnable election, although, to be honest, the closer it looks as though it was, you'd think it was winnable if it was legitimate. And as you know, I think recount should have been demanded in these swing states, because I think there are outstanding questions related to bullet ballots and the like. Last cut from these insiders at the Kamala crew, and here's a bit. This is Quentin Folks, who talks about that commercial I was speaking of and how effective that was, and they're trying to punch back. But he also breaks out a couple of figures. This is the last little bit, but I wanted you to see it. I think it's instructive.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's important to put everything into context. We've very well established the time frame. And it's honestly a lot shorter than 107 days, but we had three core objectives to the paid media. It was to define the vice president. It was to defend her on incoming attacks, and a lot of these attacks have been baked in for the past 3.5 years. While she was the vice president, they were attacking her. She was at negative 20 something on immigration. We got that down to negative 10. Trump had a positive 22-point advantage on the economy. We got that down to 7. And we had to respond to those things. And when you sort of looked at the core issues, aside from the attacks, like trans issues are just at the bottom for voters. The economy, inflation, crime, immigration are the top issues. They were also some of the issues that she was getting attacked on. And to the element of sort of defining her and doing it in a way that sort of fit within what you're trying to do, there's a direct approach that you can take to anything, and then there is an approach that you can take that accomplishes two of the three objectives. A lot of the stuff that we did, such as talking about her prosecutorial background, and then saying that she went after transnational gangs, cartels, it was to push back pseudolly on the immigration attacks that were coming at her, as well as credentialing her background on things that were absent and standalone of the Biden administration. We did a lot of stuff about her record as AG, her record as a prosecutor, not as vice president, because it also allowed her to stand alone separate from the Biden administration. On the trans attack, one, obviously it was a very effective ad at the end. I ultimately don't believe that it was about the issue of trans. I think that it made her seem out of touch. And it was sort of a pseudo-economic ad underneath it, because he was saying you're going to pay for it with taxpayer money. And it was in her own words. And that's something. But we tested a ton of responses to this, direct responses. And none of them ever tested as well as basically her, talking about what she would do, to Jen's point, the future, the type of president that she would be. There were elements of it where we did try to say, and we put ads on television of her saying, you've seen all the negative attacks against me, and try to bottle it up, because I also think you have to think about the entire sentiment when you're running a paid campaign. And the trans ad, I think because of the content, a lot of people felt like it was much bigger than what it was. But to put that into context, Team Red, meaning Trump and all the super PACs that were spending on Trump's behalf, that was 7% of their total ads was on that issue.
Was that specific? I think it was two ads, right?
Yeah.
There was the original, and then there was the one with Charlemagne. Yep.
And it was all Trump. So Trump spent, 37% of his, 200 million on that ad, but Trump wasn't the only spender. We were getting hit across the board. And so you have to take into account what all the super PACs are doing and play off of that. And I think that's what Trump was doing. His super PACs were hitting us on the economy, immigration, and crime. And Trump even started hitting us on immigration. And I think the veracity of which we came out of the gate and responded to that, they weren't expecting that from us. And then they backed off of that. And at that point, they started going into it. And so it is easy to say, with the kind of resources that we raised, we should have been able to do everything. But that's not the case. You have to make decisions in the time frame that we were in this race. We had to choose. And we chose to focus more of our attention on, one, driving down Trump, because that was not being done in our ecosystem on our side. And it was incredibly important that we did that, as well as defining her. And so if we spent this entire race, and not to be defensive about it at all, but if we spent this entire race pushing back on immigration attacks or crime attacks and pushing back against trans attacks, at what point are we bringing Trump down and or introducing the vice president on our own terms? We're playing on their field. And I think that was ultimately what went into it. But again, it wasn't something that we missed. It's just all of our testing told us that the approach that we were taking of her being more positive and talking about the economy and what she would do was a better tactic.
There you go. Thank you. I like that, again, that breakdown, because if you listen to the entire thing, he essentially takes the measure of all the different spots and the things that were working and the things that maybe weren't working as well, and the defensiveness with which they had to sort of approach a certain period of the campaign as they were getting body blows landed to Kamala Harris and her campaign. They had to strike back, and they were looking at a lot of that money that was flowing from PAC money that was dedicated to Trump, that was flowing into different campaigns and media rollouts in swing states, and they had to play counterpunch. I just thought it was fascinating. Obviously, here you're looking at a losing huddle. So these things that can sound like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. You end up at the end of this conversation going, yeah, but wait a minute, you guys lost the game, which is true. Now, again, I come back to certain things. I come back to candidate. I come back to moment in time. I also come back to a revisionist kind of view that Americans have of the past. I think there is almost a Trumpnesia, you know what I mean? This sort of amnesia about what the Trump 4 years was the first time. The guy was a mess. It was chaotic. That's why I thought that 4-year question was so, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Yeah, I am. 4 years ago, I couldn't get my personal protective equipment or whatever the hell I needed, my mask, my vaccine. It was a mess. It was utter chaos. And then you'll recall that there was a coup attempt and that the new presidential administration wasn't even granted access to anything they needed to facilitate a smooth transition during this time of national and international crisis? That's what I remember 4 years ago. So again, there's a romanticizing, though, of what it was like 4 years ago. Yeah, well, let's get back to what it was. And he just keeps saying it, right? It was great under me. It's horrible under Joe. And that's where you end up. So it's a moment in time. And I wonder if that wasn't part of it as well. Now, the last thing I would say is one of the first things I said, and that is, for me, I still feel as though it would have been only decent and only respecting the mission and the gravity of the situation to ask for a recount. I think in those swing states, I would have asked for a paper ballot recount so that every Trump bullet ballot is matched by a paper bullet ballot. That's all I would love to see. But even as I say that, I understand that in non-swing states, and I've detailed this for you before, Trump did much better than he did in 2020. And for that reason, you have to wonder if Trump voters showing up in the kind of numbers they did outside of the swing states isn't a legit reflection of Trump winning this election. But I'm sorry, just a few too many inconsistencies for me to be completely comfortable with everybody going, up, nothing to see here, I guess he won. You don't hear anything from him. It's so extraordinary. And so, again, you know me, not a conspiracy theorist particularly, but I'm ready to take a meeting with conspiracy theorists on any number of things. And sometimes just because it's coming from a conspiracy theorist doesn't mean that it's not a conspiracy. So I leave it at that. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
I wanted to recognize, if I could, Tony. It's just Tony and myself today. There's David Cay Johnston. We've got him. Wow, David's here a couple minutes early. I love it. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So Tony and I will catch up with you in the chat and super chats as we continue. But right now, let me just get to this.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I have business to do, so let me do it.
This is Mark Thompson.
How about it for a Pulitzer Prize winner? And he is here on the East Coast. It's great to be in the same time with the professor. He's now at RIT, where smart people go to be taught by smarter people. How about it for the great David Cay Johnston, everybody?
Hello,
David,
Mark.
Hello. Wow, David, a lot to talk about. We were just talking about the campaign and the Kamala Harris campaign as some of the insiders from the campaign speak about things. And essentially the only thing, and then I want to get on to Trump, who is playing kingmaker with his cabinet suggestions and nominations, I should say. And there are suggestions around the inside of the Trump camp that there is a pay-to-play kind of organization going on there. But I'll get to that in a second. They were speaking in Kamala Harris land about the short time they had to establish two things: who she was and how bad a future under Trump would be, like to establish the big bad wolf and at the same time establish Kamala Harris. And that in looking at swing state voting, they had done well to rehabilitate essentially her numbers from where she started. They just didn't quite get far enough.
I think that's a very good analysis. Trump didn't get a majority in any of the three elections. He got a plurality. And I believe the plurality in the 2024 election is smaller than the previous two. I have to go look at the numbers. I just not sure my memory's right about that. But I think the big story is that 13 million people stayed home. It's the smaller number of people turning out. And when people don't turn out, either they don't care at all. Those are the habitual don't turnouts. That's always the number one choice in presidential elections, didn't care to vote. But when you see a drop of that size, it suggests to me that there's a lot of people who were satisfied with what was going on. with the rising wages in the lower half of the pay scale, the falling rate of inflation. I just was in my car a few minutes ago hearing an NPR reporter talk about how the price of eggs is up 60% from a year ago, made no mention of the fact that we just had to kill more than a quarter of all the laying hens in America because of an avian flu, and didn't mention that turkey's less expensive this Thanksgiving than the previous one, and so are potatoes and a number of other things. So I think that she had this very constrained time. You and I know who Kamala Harris is and was, but to most people, they don't know who the vice president is. There's a Broadway play from long ago that was made into a movie in the, I think, 30s. It might have been the 40s, about a man who lives in a boarding house in Washington, D.C. And one night they go around the table and people are asked to talk about themselves, and they come to him. Well, what do you do? I'm the vice president of the United States. Oh, okay. And they go on around the room. I wish Turner Classic Movies, if they is in their vaults, would play that movie again. So, Donald won. I mean, I don't have any problem if people want to do a recount, but Donald won. I think the issue now is to understand what this means. And Mark, I have said for 35 of the 36 years I've known Donald creates his own reality. I've been testing that line on people. And what I've learned is a lot of people get what it means. There are a lot of people who are like, that doesn't mean anything to them. So Timothy Snyder, the Yale professor who is an expert on authoritarianism, has written some wonderful, very short books on this, gave an interview the other day. That's what prompted me to begin questioning what I was saying and whether it resonated with people. And he said, you have to understand that Donald Trump lives in a fictional world in his head of his own creation. Therefore, he's never does anything wrong. He never does anything he shouldn't, because it's all fiction. And of course, what he's done is managed to get tens of millions of people to buy into his fictional universe. So he just announced his tariff plan, how much he's going to impose tariffs. And as I mentioned last week and the week before on this show, tariffs will lead to higher prices on domestic manufactured goods to just below the tariffed price of the good from China, Canada, or Mexico, which are our biggest trading partners. Canada first, Mexico, and then China. Prices have to go up if that happens. That's inflationary. If we round up large numbers of people in the country illegally, two things have to happen. There won't be enough people to process slaughterhouses, to kill and dress meat, or to tend to crops. You don't just put seed in the ground and walk away. Tend to trees, to harvest the crops, to process them. That will mean higher food prices. And there won't be people who, for very little money, will do everything from cleaning your house or landscaping your, cutting your lawn, to a variety of other jobs. And that's going to be inherently inflationary. And many of the people in the country that Trump wants to deport have been here a long time. Bank of America started making mortgages for people who are in the country illegally more than 40 years ago. Well, Tom Homan, in charge of deportations, was asked on MSNBC, well, what are you going to do about the children of these people who are American citizens? We're going to deport them. You can't legally deport American citizens, no matter what their age is. So assuming they don't get a judge who says, yeah, you can deport them or ignore the law, that means your local county government is going to have higher costs. And the larger the number of children in your community, the higher the costs. So where I live in Monroe County, New York, Rochester, New York, not going to be a big deal. But if you live, as I have in the past, in Orange County, California, or Los Angeles, or Santa Clara County, or San Mateo County, if you live in any of the Arizona counties, Pima, Cochise, etc., your property taxes are going to go up as these children are left behind by their parents. And I think a lot of parents are going to do that. In fact, I was talking with one of my friends today about, imagine if you were in that position and you had children, say, 8, 10, and 12. what would you do? And she said, I would leave them. And I said, well, they'd probably end up in the system. And she said, yeah, I don't think that would be as bad since they'd never been to my country, whatever it was, don't speak the language, as leaving and not possibly getting ever back in. And she said she would make sure that her children were talked to about, predators among foster and group home people. But there are going to be all sorts of costs that are going to flow out of these things because Donald doesn't think things through. He just makes up his own reality. And to think that China won't retaliate, China doesn't have to put tariffs on goods to retaliate. We need neodymium. Neodymium, you cannot make the microphone you use in your professional lab, a smartphone, a smart bomb. You cannot make these without neodymium. I wrote about this 20 years ago in my book, Free Lunch, how the Chinese cornered the world neodymium supply and its usefulness, which was developed with American taxpayer dollars. And China will just say, well, we're not going to sell you any neodymium, or we're going to sell it to you at 10 times the price. You want your military to suffer, America? Just do this to us, and you're going to hit back. The Donald believes that, I do something, and then people just bow down and accept it. That's not how the world works.
Yeah. By the way, this is a good question for you. Mo is asking, who gets to keep the tariffs that are collected, David Cay?
The U.S. government gets the tariffs, but they do not come from the countries. A tariff is, for all practical purposes, a national retail sales tax. And the profits made by domestic manufacturers that will increase, even if they have fewer sales, because if I make cars and I compete with a Chinese car maker, and we both sell right now for $10,000, and Donald puts a 60% tariff on, the Chinese car will now cost the consumer $16,000. I'm going to raise my price to $15,000. I'm going to make a $6,000 profit instead of a $1,000 profit. Even if I sell half as many cars, I'm vastly richer. And though that will result in profits to me that will be very lightly taxed by the Trump administration. So the actual tariff the government will get from the consumers. But the domestic excess profit that it enables, that will stay almost entirely with the people who own manufacturing companies. And this is essentially a scheme to enrich them. And this is textbook economics. I'm not out there with some, edge theory. This is solid textbook stuff that was taught in Economics 101 last year, 10 years ago, 100 years ago.
Speaking of money and getting money in corrupt ways, inside the Trump administration that is to be, there's a lot of jockeying for positions for cabinet posts, and et cetera. And the latest breaking news is that they, within their own administration, again, administration to be, as he is president-elect, they're looking into this Boris Ashton and the fact that he actually positioned himself between the president and those who wanted to gain access to the president for various cabinet positions and also to lobby for other reasons. And he actually was charging, it is suggested, based on these allegations, charging people money. I mean, $30,000 was the money I saw. I also saw $10,000 a month, et cetera. It varied for access to the president, again, president-elect, and for essentially representing that person to the president in a positive light. Can you speak to that?
Right. Yes, and according to some of the news reports, J.D. Vance ran a sting on Boris Epstein to nail him for this, and apparently has him cold. And given the outsized influence that Boris Epstein has had on Trump's actions and decision-making, I'm not surprised the long knives are out among other people in the Trump circle who want to pare him back for their own benefit. My goodness, the idea that people who work in or around a White House are jockeying for position and undercutting other people, shocking, absolutely shocking.
That's what I said in the first hour. It's pretty much Washington, 101.
And setting yourself up to get paid because you got access to a president is not new, but it's usually not done in this blunt, utterly corrupt fashion. It's done in a more subtle fashion. Why don't you become a client of my lobbying firm? And I play golf with the president every other Saturday, and I'll talk you up in the clubhouse or on the tee on the ninth hole. Epstein apparently was just very heavy-handed about this. But what you're beginning to see is these different forces around Trump contending for one another. Now, interestingly, when Joe Biden was president, there were almost no leaks out of that White House negative to him because people were incredibly loyal to him. They thought he was a good, decent man. During the Trump administration, the first time, there were lots of leaks. Loyalty with Donald is entirely a one-way street. And if you're trying to push your position, you may find out that Donald will just squash you because it's all about Donald. It's not about the good of the country. It's not about, the people who believe that Donald Trump is the champion of the working guy. They are major characters in his fictional world in which he creates his own reality. This is a man who campaigned in 2016 saying wages are too high. He is opposed to the state and local minimum wages that have been raised in some places to as much as, I think, $19 or $20. A lot of places, 15 or 16. He hates unions. What did Pope Francis say 10 years ago? Without unions, there cannot be economic justice. And when did wages of American workers stop growing for the vast majority and flatten out and some years decline compared to 1973? When we started going after unions. Most workers are commodities. Whether you're a police detective, that's a pretty skilled job, or a secretary, or a newspaper reporter, almost all people in jobs are commodities. They can be replaced by somebody else. There are some people who have either an audience or talent, and they make enormous amounts of money. The TV cable hosts that you see, even though their audiences are only 1 to 3 million people, some of those folks make $3 million a month. When Keith Olbermann was on what became the Al Jazeera channel, it was called Current TV. It was owned by Al Gore and his friend Joel Hyatt. He was making, the story was around town, $15 million a year, because he was their star person to draw an audience. When the Comcast family, the Roberts family of Philadelphia, bought NBC Universal and acquired Comcast, I said right then, Keith Olbermann will be gone before the deal closes. It's not possible that the Roberts family, who are very right, will keep him, even though he brings an audience. And sure enough, Keith got called in and told, we owe you, and the story at the time was somewhere around $30 million left on your contract. Here's a check for payment in full. Goodbye. The money that people make in these positions is just off the chart. I once wrote a proposal for a movie about Steve Wynn, the very impressive Las Vegas gambling impresario, and Donald Trump and their rivalry. It took a weekend. I got paid for writing this proposal that took 1 weekend, 7 months of my New York Times salary. So when you get into this world of the TV where he's drawing people, hosts from Fox News, the money is just unbelievably off the chart. Now, the people you see doing the afternoon shows, they make good money, maybe $200,000 to $500,000 a year, something like that, maybe more, depending on their draw. But that's not what ordinary people make. And this is who Donald identifies with. And so then who does he pick for cabinet posts? So he's picked a doctor from an unaccredited Caribbean medical school for one of the top medical jobs. He's picked Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has no qualifications to do anything, and has these crazy ideas that vaccines are harmful. And by the way, the measles lobby is applauding. Measles, polio, whooping cough, pertussis, your and my parents and grandparents were scared to death of these diseases because they knew people all around them who died, and they didn't want their own children to die. But vaccines, no, that's not why those diseases are almost never heard of. Those are harmful. There's going to be a huge price to pay for this. He did make one Oh, and then he put the snake oil salesman Mehmet Oz in charge of Medicare and Medicaid. The one appointment he's made that looks like it might be useful is a Dr. Marty, I think it's pronounced Macron, a physician who has some outside the box ideas and appears to be a serious person. If he is confirmed, as I would expect, he holds out the hope of some interesting ideas, and we should always be open to new ideas. We should be cautious about them because new things often don't work out as we intended. The law of unintended consequences. Solving a problem creates new problems. But this is a guy who appears to have some interesting ideas that we really should debate. We shouldn't be stodgy and say, well, that's the way we've always done it, therefore we must continue to do it. That's ridiculous.
And so his new ideas, David, just to follow up on that, and I know he's, the cake isn't baked on him yet, but can you speak to what intrigued you?
He thinks that we inadequately diagnose people, which I think almost every physician I know has complained that we rely too much on medical tests and on expensive technology when careful questioning of people and some simple tests. I had to go see a surgeon once about a back injury that I suffered more than 50 years ago. And I walked in with my MRI images, and he said, oh, we don't need to look at those. And proceeded to diagnose me in about 20 minutes and then said, all right, here's what the films are going to show. And it was exactly what they showed. And I said, how'd you do that? And he said, long before we had this technology, we figured out how to figure out what's going on inside your body. He thinks that our financing mechanisms need some review. I'm a big advocate of that, and I have been for a long time. I think employing tens of thousands of people as clerks to process, your medical claim, and then you have to go fight with them over $10.06 is wasteful, inefficient. It's feather bedding in the old railroad industry term for jobs that you don't need. They're make work jobs. So he has some interesting ideas. And by the way, Donald, before he became a Republican of convenience, Donald told me very clearly, and we discussed it more than once, that, as he put it, healthcare should be like the roads. When you need to use them, you just use them. You don't pay. And if you want something extra, you pay for that, i.e. toll roads, where you don't have to have big trucks if you're on the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey, or you can go more quickly. But that's what other countries do. If we had the French healthcare system, the best in the world by every study I've read, and I've read a half a dozen of them, you get seen sooner and faster by excellent doctors. The health status of French people is better than that of Americans. Even if you just do white Americans, it's better. And in France, you don't pay out of pocket with very small exceptions. Nobody loses their home. Nobody goes bankrupt because of healthcare bills in France. And if we had their system, it would save an amount of money equal to all the income taxes paid by everybody who makes less than $600,000 a year.
Wow.
So all else being equal, and it never is, but all else being equal, if we had the French healthcare system, we'd get better care, we'd get seen faster, our health status would improve, and you wouldn't pay income taxes till you made $600,000.
And that's just crazy. I mean,
but even if it's only $100,000 would be the threshold for paying taxes, it would make an enormous difference in American life. But socialism.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's there are so many special interests. And as I come to you from Washington, D.C. today, I mean, we're a heartbeat from all of them, even from where I sit. And one of the special interests, and it's huge, is the nation's insurance companies, and the healthcare world is filled with a really terrifically effective lobbying mechanism that occurs here in Washington, along with the military-industrial complex and all them, the ones that are sort of spoken of frequently. I want to get to the Trump, because you mentioned the cabinet, some of the other picks. He talked about and they realized that Project 2025 was this radioactive kind of thing. Don't mention it on the campaign trail. He said he didn't even know what it was, et cetera. And then, of course, he's populated his cabinet nominees with tons of these Project 2025 people, right? I mean, Russell Vogt, and I know this, and you do too, David. I mean, the Office of Management and Budget may sound like one of those things that it really just doesn't, whatever, I guess that's a guy who just signs off on a bunch of checks. But they actually are extremely powerful. And this guy, Vogt, who comes out of Project 2025, he's going to run OMB again. He ran it during the Trump administration the first time. And I wonder, he's a true believer. I mean, he really is. And I'm wondering if you can speak for a moment about both him and more broadly sort of the true believer Project 2025 guys who are, and they're mostly literally guys, who are going to be taking over in this next term.
Well, so Trump during the campaign, said total contradiction. I never heard of it. I don't want to know what it is. I'm not interested. And then on another day, he would say, well, parts of it I like and parts of it I don't. Those two things are completely incompatible. When the project was launched, he blessed it. There's videotape of him blessing it and saying, these are my people and this will be my administration's plan. But, Donald lies. That's not news. OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, wields tremendous power. My late sister-in-law worked there in the Nixon administration. She was a very conservative Republican before she became a diplomat. And she would talk at dinner about, man, we really went after those bureaucrats in this office. And we said, you're not going to do that. They wield enormous influence and power. And there used to be a project it lost its funding eventually, but for years there was a small nonprofit in Washington, D.C. that I wrote about from time to time that was the watchdog for OMB. And they would issue, directives and orders, and this outfit would tell you about them. And you could see back then how it wielded power. When Nixon was president, he refused to spend money Congress had appropriated. Now, let's remember, under our Constitution, the president is effectively subordinate to Congress. Article 1 of our Constitution is Congress, and it has the power of the purse, the power to tax, etc. And Article 2, Donald says, I have an Article 2 so I can do anything I want. That's not what it says. What it says is you're the commander-in-chief of the military, and you will carry out the orders of Congress. Your job is to execute, that's why we call you the executive, to execute what Congress wants. And Trump has made it very clear that if he thinks we shouldn't spend money somewhere, he's going to cut off the faucet. Well, there's a 1974 law passed in response to Nixon called the Impoundment Act that a president can't do that. If Congress has said you're to spend money on this, you're supposed to spend the money. There's going to be a huge fight over that because Trump is going to refuse to pay bills. And OMB will be central to this. But even if they were to lose that, they can slow walk money. They can find reasons to say this contract is invalid. I was talking to some of my fellow faculty members and then on the phone with some people who are real academics, unlike me, lifelong academics at other schools. And they are all expecting that unless you are a right-wing school like tiny Hillsdale College in Michigan or George Mason, the libertarian university just outside D.C., that there's going to be holdbacks on research projects of all kinds. And here's why that's really important. More than half the growth in our economy since World War II is due to taxpayer investments in science. This is a well-studied field. The only arguments are, well, is it 58% or 64%? I mean, they're tiny arguments on the margin. It is investments by American taxpayers in science, hiring companies in many cases to do the work, hiring Oracle, which was created to help the CIA have a database, and now is incredibly important to how we work. Developing neodymium powders and metals for things like smart bombs and iPhones and the like. These are from taxpayer investments. Balzac wrote in his most famous novel that behind every great fortune lies a great crime. Not true in America today, but what is true is behind almost every great fortune are government subsidies and favors. And it's just central to them.
Ain't that true, David? To the point that I even think in some of the research that you're talking about in research funding, where the spigot is going to be turned off or opened up, these are ultimately special interests if they can grab Trump's ear long enough. The problem is that the people who've had Trump's ear, it would seem to me, I guess I'm asking you, and who've had it for a very long time, are the Project 2025 people. So you're kind of really riding with that strategy.
Yeah. So Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, if I said that right, in their made up role at the Department of Government Efficiency, which is just going to be an advisory group. Think about the power that they're going to have. Elon Musk has $13 billion in government contracts. His fortune is heavily tied to government money. Boeing competes with him in some of his businesses, his space business. You think he's not going to find inefficiency in Boeing's connections with the government, but not in his own? Let's live in the real world here. The things they're proposing to do are going to allow them to punish their enemies and take care of their friends. So if you like people at a school in Texas, you can steer government money there. And if you don't like the folks at Harvard or Yale, you can pull money away from them. And we've never had this. We've had professional government. Is it perfectly efficient? Of course not. Frankly, I don't want to live in a country that's perfectly efficient. Think about it. Do you really want the government to be able to efficiently do whatever it wants, like rounding people up? Inefficiency has some.
You've gone to the worst example first.
Sure. But when the commissars wanted to seize all the guns in Poland, they didn't have any trouble doing so because everybody's guns were registered. And if you didn't live on a farm where you need the gun because you might have foxes or wolves or whatever, they could seize your guns right away because they knew who you were. And so I would hope the Second Amendment crowd would think about that. Keep in mind the way that all these claims, Obama's going to take your guns, Biden's going to take your guns, nobody took your guns.
Yeah, there's a sense of the boogeyman coming that they really have sold so effectively, and sort of the left is the boogeyman, and it's just remarkable how people have, I think, in large measure, unwittingly, signed on to an administration that will hurt many of their interests. I mean, when you look at those, I look at those rallies, and I just see older people, probably requiring or wanting government assistance on some level, Medicare related or whatever it might be. And I see how this administration is committed to rolling back all of these different programs that are there to help this very constituency. It is just a sign of how broken the political system is that Trump was able to gain so much in the way of popularity. It wasn't just a question of them reluctantly voting for Trump. They anxiously voted for Donald Trump,
right.
David?
Right. And I think that one of the shocks that people are going to get is they haven't decided what to do yet. But the signals that are being put out by the Trump people are that they're just going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. If you do that, 30 million people will no longer have health insurance. And the health insurance for most of them isn't very good. The reimbursement rates are low. Doctors don't want to take you. You go to the end of the line or you get low-quality doctors. But consider my 54-year-old oldest son, who's had quadruple bypass surgery. No insurance company will take him on as an individual, and he's a small businessman. So he would be utterly without health insurance. That doesn't mean that he won't get some kind of care. By law, you have to be treated in an emergency room, but chronic heart disease is not something you treat in an emergency room. It's just a very expensive way to patch you up for the moment. If he were to become totally disabled because he isn't getting medical care, now he goes on to the costs of the taxpayers. There is no avoiding the costs of a humane society. And they're certainly not going to say, the solution to this is we'll just kill these people. Remember Alan Grayson, the congressman from Florida, the very abrasive congressman, once said the Republican health care plan is simple to understand. If you get sick and aren't wealthy, die soon. And he was sanctioned for that, but I think he was generally in the right ballpark there. And so there are going to be lots of negative economic consequences of the incoming administration to the extent that they walk their talk. Now, the last time around, Donald didn't have people around him to do this, and he is an incompetent manager, so he couldn't do it himself. This time, he's got a lot of people who are competent managers and true believers. And, disruption per se is not a bad thing. Joseph Schumpeter, the great economist, talked about creative destruction. That's how you get economic advances. But that's not what they're proposing. They're proposing to change the economy of the country at the expense of children, the disabled, the elderly, and the sick. In other words, the people who can't fight back.
There's that, and I have two more quick things for you, David, before I let you go. There's the media, and I see it showing up in our chat. People are going, what's going to happen to journalism? What's going to happen to the media? You see the cable networks to which you referred earlier, MSNBC, for example, something of an endangered species. They're being cleaved off from by the Comcast people from NBC News. So you'll have the talking heads for a while, probably, an opinion kind of thing. But you're not going to have any NBC News backed up journalism, and Comcast wants nothing to do with that. And I understand why. They have a lot to risk in this Trump administration. They have a huge company, and they don't need to stick their necks out for MSNBC, which is not, it's just a small sliver of what that organization, that is to say Comcast, is all about. What is the future of media and journalism as it relates to a Trump administration?
Well, there's going to be a full-out assault on journalism. Donald has said many times, going well back before he ran for president the first time in 2000, quote, "You shouldn't be allowed to write things about me unless I approve," close quote. That's as dictatorial as it can be. It is totally contrary to American Constitution and American tradition. They're going to try to find a court case to get to the Supreme Court to undo the 1964 Times v. Sullivan decision. That was where people seeking to get voting rights for Black people took out a full-page ad in the New York Times about the abusive conduct of Alabama law enforcement. There were some minor factual errors in the ad. No, the substance of the ad was right on, but there were some little errors. And the court held that if you're going to have robust public debate as anticipated by our Constitution, you can't go forward with the plaintiff's argument that you have to be perfect in what you say and indisputable. So they adopted a standard that if you're a public figure, you and I are public figures. Somebody, I have people have written on the internet that I'm a child molester. I'm a public figure. I would have to prove actual malice by them and that I suffered harm, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. That's in my view, that's fine. If you're Joe Schmo down the street who's never been in the newspaper except maybe the announcement of their birth or wedding and doesn't want to be, you're held to a higher standard. Public officials should be open to full-blown scrutiny, not you can only write what I approve of. But they're going to go after Times v. Sullivan. That will not stop investigative reporting. It will just make it vastly more difficult and costly and cautious. If MSNBC gets bought up by somebody for the purpose of shutting it down, and people do that, somebody can create a new channel. There's an audience, and a profitable audience, for something like MSNBC or Fox or much more center of the road CNN.
Sure, I mean,
and we've seen on the right.
To be clear, David, it could be easily taken over by like a Musk, let's say. I mean, it's probably a chump change to him. I mean, it's not. It's way less than Twitter.
Right, or it could be taken over by someone who views the world more like George Soros, who's a great champion of democracy and trying to get Americans to understand their own democracy, as well as people in Eastern Europe now understand democracy. They're going to go after individual journalists. I may be one of them. They're going to be terrific harassment of journalists. And I've been writing in forums that I'm in for various journalists about, you need to not shrink away. You need to be brave. You do the right thing. And most people, it's like what's going to happen at the Justice Department. They're going to pick a couple of people out to fire for inappropriate reasons. And a couple of people will stand up to them. But a lot of people have mortgages and kids in college and a mother-in-law to support, and they're going to knuckle under to some degree because of the practicalities of life.
I think that's such a great comment that applies to everybody in Washington and the entire the instruments that were supposed to keep Trump or those in a Trump administration in line, I mean, they're ultimately cowed by the fact that they, you want to live, you want to just have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to end up like the Hollywood 10, who couldn't get any work. Dalton Trumbo
Thank you.
wrote
Exactly.
a bunch of some of the greatest movies, some of the greatest movie scripts of all time under the names of other people because he was blacklisted for what? His political views, which I find offensive, but that's fine. He's entitled to them. They don't believe that. They believe you must toe the line, and millions of MAGAs share that view.
There is
so it was
only,
the second thing you wanted to get into.
The second thing is this. There's only one through line on these cabinet positions that I can find. There's no sort of philosophical underpinning about anything with Trump. I mean, you got, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth and, these people who are, at least in the early going, I was sort of figuring, if they come across well on TV and they kind of look good, I mean, cosmetically, Trump is drawn to them and he wants them to rep his administration. And basically, it's like a casting call in Hollywood that way. But at least in Hollywood, they make you actually, read the lines and figure out whether you're any good at the show. But what I'm getting at is perhaps the most disturbing. It's hard because I think there are a lot of disturbing appointments here potentially. But the Hegseth appointment will likely get pushed back, particularly if there is an FBI background check. And I wonder, David, again, to review, tell me if you feel he could really get away with just big timing and big footing the FBI background check the way he has done now. I mean, there's a lot of dark money that's funding this transition. He's not taking government money, and he's saying, screw you with the background checks.
So the any incoming administration is supposed to sign a bunch of contracts, and they get a lot of money appropriated by Congress. They get office space, telephones, computers, a budget for travel, and Trump is refusing to do that. Money donated to the transition and to the inauguration is supposed to be public. In my last Trump book, The Big Cheat, I tell how Stephanie Wolkoff, who used to be Melania's best friend, was asked to take millions of dollars off the books. Clearly, she believes from the context from Russians. So they didn't have to report what would be illegal gifts. Foreigners can't give to these things. And, she had enough sense to say, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with that. And one of the questions I raise is, how brazen are these folks? Because 10 minutes on the first 10 minutes on the phone with her, I knew she wasn't somebody who just looks the other way. She's a sophisticated woman who knows how to look out for herself. They're refusing to sign all these documents. They're refusing to have FBI background checks of people. Tulsi Gabbard is particularly troublesome. Sebastian Gorka, who was supposed to debate me once on British radio and just screamed and yelled and wouldn't let me get a word in, he is a absolutely through and through fascist. He wore his fascist uniform to the Trump inauguration.
That's right. He wore the medal, which is fascism, is what David's talking about. That's absolutely true.
And so if you don't do background checks on these people, you don't know what else they have done. If you bury background checks the way they did with Brett Kavanaugh, 4,000 tips came in on Brett Kavanaugh, and none of them were investigated. They were all turned over to the White House, including ones from women who apparently clearly claimed, he raped me, not coerced me uncomfortably. He flat out raped me. All that was buried. One of the things that will follow if Hegseth, who says, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry, he took a woman who says she felt she'd been drugged with something like Repanol or some kind of date rape drug to her room, took her phone away, blocked her exit from the room, had sex with her. Not rape. That tells you a lot about his mindset. But apparently there's a second woman who has a similar complaint and tells me there are probably others, because things like this are rarely one-offs. They are patterns of behavior. So if Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard get these very high-level positions with access to intelligence, I think the Five Eyes program will radically change. The U.S., Canada, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia have a very intense intelligence sharing operation. The US, the UK, and the Australians in particular have massive investments in capturing what's called SIGNET, signals intelligence. Every overseas phone call they capture, even though they don't listen to most of them, but when they need something, they can find it. The Australians aren't going to share with us. The British aren't going to share with us sensitive materials if these people are in the White House, especially given Gabbard openly spreading Kremlin propaganda. John Bolton, whatever you think of John Bolton, and I've interviewed him, I don't see the world the way he does it all, but I respect that he is a serious person who understands world geopolitical affairs on a very sophisticated level. John Bolton says Sebastian Gorka, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, they have no business having any job in the government. He's a rock rib, solid conservative, and they're not listening to him because this administration doesn't have anything to do with being conservative or liberal. It has to do with Donald being America's first dictator. And this is a terrible thing to be able to just thumb your nose at Congress's requirement. You sign a contract, you run FBI background checks on people.
It's a basic ethics agreement. I mean, it's alarming just on the surface when you see him push back against that. It's like, what could possibly be disturbing to you, sir, about signing a basic ethics agreement?
And then the national security implications of this are just absolutely god awful. And I'm somebody who's literally exposed spies and foreign agents. Okay, I counseled a journalist who's working on a story the other day. You want law enforcement and the government to have an intelligence function. You don't want to live in San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York City without a police intelligence function. But then you have to control it so that they don't do things like LA, where they had undercover officers in Moscow and Havana, and the police chief assigned at least 8 officers to have sex with women just so they would give them information between the sheets. You have to control it and make sure they're actually working on crimes, not on falderall and other stuff. Well, Donald Trump has no concept of that. He has no concept of intelligence. He didn't take his briefings a lot. He doesn't know anything about the world, but he responds to flattery. And I think sooner or later, we're going to have something happen that hopefully will wake the people who support Trump up to realize this man has no respect for the national security needs of our country.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope so. I mean, we've heard, look, he met with the Russians with only the translator present, and everybody else on staff was excused.
And then alone.
Right,
and
that's
then
right, alone
alone.
with only their translator. That's exactly right. I mean, it's and then tearing up the notes, and I mean, there's so many. I just don't know what people need to get a cold slap in the face on this stuff. But on the way out,
Mark, why would most people? Mark, why would most people understand that the same way that a lot of people think from his TV show that he's a business genius? What do they know about how a board of directors works, about management theory? I used to teach at a graduate business school, okay, and was a business reporter. Why would they know that? Why, they wouldn't. So that's not surprising. The Democrats, I would argue, have done a very poor job of trying to message to people, understand this is why these things matter and you need to pay attention to them. And you would think conservatives particularly would be deeply concerned about national security matters, about Donald. We know Donald has given away national secrets. It is indisputable that he's done so. How many and how deeply, we don't know. We just know about a handful. And people should be worried about that.
Steve says to you on the way out, by the way, regarding David Cay Johnston's shirt, Joe Altobelli was a childhood hero to me as a fan of the Rochester Red Wings. There you go.
That's this is a shirt that was produced here. My children bought me a copy because somewhere way down at the bottom is my name. It starts off with Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass, the leader of the suffrage movement and one of the leaders of the abolition movement.
Yeah, pretty good crew to be mentioned in the same context. David, thank you as always. And this Thanksgiving, we always we tip our hat to you and thank you for your presence on this show. It's helped us enormously, and thank you.
Talk to you next week.
Okay,
Take
my
care.
friend. Yeah, David Cay Johnston, everybody.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Are we? There you go. There you go. Tony with the rallies the picture of Joe. Well done. I know we're a little late, but I really love my conversations with David, and I hope you do too. I think you do, based on all of your reactions. It's time well spent. Peter, thank you for the $5 super chat. At National Airport, do lobbyists meet you like the Hare Krishnas? Yes, it really is true. That's they meet you. Tomorrow, I'll tell the story again about how I was mistaken for Aaron Sorkin as I got off the plane. That was my last trip. Wes hits us for the $5 super sticker. Thank you, thank you so much. And and I'll get to Jefferson Graham, who's waiting. Mark, the people chose they're eating your pets over the let me help you buy your first house. That's true, Franco. That's true. When you put it that way, it's so disgusting, isn't it? I guess the cat ladies believe Vance and didn't vote with her. Makes no sense. Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, Franco, thank you for the $10 super chat. I agree. It doesn't make sense, but alas, that is the country in which we live. Okay, so now.
The Mark Thompson Show.
From Washington, D.C., where I am, we go to California, where he joins us regularly. He is the former writer for technology and covering it for USA Today, gave that all up. Now he runs his Photo Walks TV on YouTube. How about it for Jefferson Graham, everybody? Hi, Jeff. Thank you for your patience. You do your something annually. You do your turkeys, your tech turkeys. And it's always interesting to me, what might make the tech turkey list. Can you speak to some of your turkeys for us? You're starting with the Vision Pro, from what I can see.
It's really easy. Yeah. What happens if you put out a product that is a tech marvel that nobody wants? And that was the Vision Pro.
That was always your position, to be fair. You always said, hey, nobody wants this, and they're sure as hell not going to pay this kind of money for it.
Not only they don't want it, but would they use it again in the second or third week? That, it's really cool. Oh, it looks wonderful. But it's a solitary product. It's a headset that you can watch photos and look at photos in a different way and watch a movie if you could actually have the battery last, and whether you could actually be relaxed with this thing on your head for 2 hours, and you could use it as another monitor. Anyway, by the end of the year, Apple has dramatically cut back on production, and they're feverishly trying to come up with a new model that's not $3,500 and is not as heavy. So that's a really easy tech turkey of the year, rejected by the public. And in number 2, we're going to X. Now, X was transformed from Twitter in the prior year in July of 2023, but it wasn't until 2024 that Elon Musk really turned it into a right-wing propaganda, hate-filled, hate speech, conspiracy theory machine. And you could say, well, he got more out of it than most. Yeah, it's not worth as much, but he helped get Trump reelected with it. So he obviously got more out of it, even if it's a shell of its former self.
Yeah,
but
he got his money's worth, right?
He got his money's worth, but by the end of the year, millions of people were flocking it to go to Blue Sky and have the old Twitter experience again.
Yeah, so but thank you for mentioning that. We're just starting at Blue Sky, so it's the MTS on Blue Sky. If you're over to Blue Sky is just like Twitter. You can load it on like an app. You sign up just like Twitter. And then we're the MTS. I believe that's what it is. Tony, you'll double check that? I think that's right. I've got to get more literate on the entire world of Blue Sky. But yeah, you're right. People are flying there, and they're also going to Threads, I suppose. But
yeah, they went to Threads. They went to Threads when Threads came out. I don't think Threads gets much action anymore. I think really all the action is now at Blue Sky. It's sort of been deemed the Twitter alternative. But I could be wrong.
Cool.
I could be wrong.
No, I that sounds about right. And so X turns out to be the cesspool. People move over to Blue Sky, and that ends up, X does, alongside the Vision Pro as one of your tech turkeys of 2024. What's another one?
I have more. Number 3 is a Sonos app update that made Sonos speakers inoperable. Okay? So I love Sonos speakers. They're wonderful. But I made sure to only use the old version of the app So what happened to Sonos? They had to lay off 100 people because this app update was so onerous. They saw their stock go down by 25%. They've been scrambling. They in the Wall Street projections, they said it's going to be lower because of the app update. So they're trying to come back to life. I hope they do. But the moral of the story to everybody listening and watching is when you get those, it's time for an app update notifications, pause, hold off. Don't be in a rush. Wait. Make sure that everything's okay until you do it. And 9 times out of 10, you really want to wait.
That's pretty funny. I mean, I laugh only because, you always feel like I want the latest update. I want the latest update. But now, you're saying, no, you don't want the latest update necessarily. Let it.
Not at all. Maybe on the phones when there's security updates. Trust me, the Sonos app was not a security update. But speaking of Apple, I've got them in number 4. So they've got 2 slots on the top 5. Apple Intelligence. Last June, they announced that all these wonderful AI features were coming to the iPhone in the fall. Well, people that cover Apple all these years assume that meant on the new iPhone, but it wasn't. They released a new iPhone without all these new features that they were using in the marketing to sell the new iPhone. So, I don't think we've ever seen anything like it, Mark, where they announced...
Never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
They announced these new features and they're not there. And then once they are there, you go, okay, they're going to summarize my email for me. They're going to help me compose an email. All right. They're going to give me a new, more responsive Siri? No, not yet. And the one good thing is that they will now transcribe your audio recordings in voice memos, which for a journalist like myself is fantastic. And it's really good. So that's a nice new feature. But if you're going to come up with something new, wait until it's available. That's number 4. And then number 5, we talked about the Google Pixel and their new AI editing tools that let you put in all this fake stuff. I am a photographer. I photograph what I see and what I love. I'm not photographing what I don't see. And I was not happy about the idea of the internet being flooded with all these fake photos. So that's a turkey for me.
Sure. I want to ask you about the iPhone. I got the 15, but
you got 15, the 16. I thought you bought the 16.
I got the 15. I'll tell you why. I got the 15 because I was getting the 16. I'd signed up for the 16. They said, finally, your 16 is here. And right as I was going to, my backup tech guru, Anthony Davis, who sometimes comes through the show, not in a tech capacity, but in a political, he's a political analyst. He said, Mark, and he said in the British accent, Mark, don't be so stupid as to buy the 16. The 15 is essentially the same thing, and you can get one for substantially less money. So I went and I got the 15. And he's right. It's got all the basic features. I checked out all the specs. Now, the one thing it has, and I don't know if the 16 has it as well, and you'll forgive me for this lengthy preamble, but it heats up it's absolutely so hot that I can't even hold it. Are you having that problem with the 16?
No. Mm-hmm. No, and I've never had it with the 15 or the 14 or the 13 or the 12.
You think I just have a bad
it's
phone?
Time to return it.
Or do you feel as though it is I was mentioning this to Anthony, and he was saying, I think it's the operating system. There are several other people who have complained of this. No, not that you've heard of it.
When is it heating up? When you're on the phone talking? When you're scrolling?
It's hard to find a correlation of when it's been on for a while. It's hot. It gets hot.
Okay. Well,
return the phone. Batteries.
Number one is return the phone.
That hot. Okay.
Number 2 is call Apple tech support. They have the best tech support of any tech company. They answer the phone pretty much any time of day. They will talk to you. You don't have to wait an hour to get them on the phone, and they will work it through. So I would definitely call them, and they don't care even if it's out of warranty, which, many of us who have been around for a while remember what it was like. You'd call a company and say, I need your help. Well, when did the warranty expire? Well, it expired a week ago. We can't talk to you.
Sure.
Apple doesn't
you're saying
do that.
It's not like that anymore. Okay. Well, I'll follow that then. The best area to get tech bang for the buck through the holidays, what do you think it is? Black Friday coming up?
Oh, you mean to get sales?
Yeah, I'm saying
it's actually Thursday and Friday. It's Thursday and Friday.
I guess what I'm getting at is we just talked about tech turkeys. Is there something that you'd say, hey, this is an area you should look if you're looking for a fill in the blank? I feel like television is one of those things. Monitor is one of those. No?
TVs are always great. I'm buying a new computer on Thursday. I'm buying a Mac Mini. The new Mac Mini is 4 times the power of the computer I have now. It's been upgraded. Apple only has a sale on Thursday and Friday every year. And
you get it through the Apple website?
Yeah, very minor. Like I'll get $25 off or something, but it's $25 off, and I'll be happy to, if I'm spending a $2,000 computer, to have it come out to $1,975, right?
Everybody's telling me what you're telling me, which is return the damn phone. There's something wrong with it. Okay.
Yes.
So,
beyond that, whatever you're interested in is going to be on sale. Every company, Amazon, Newer, Anchor, Apple, Best Buy, they're all having stuff on sale. And if there's things that you're interested in, because it's a big wide world, I can't specify one thing. Maybe you want a TV, maybe you want a computer.
Sure.
It's going to be on sale. Maybe it's $5 off, maybe it's $10, maybe it's $70 off. I did a newsletter on Saturday where I just talked about the products that I love and that I use, and then I checked, like, the tripod that I used was $75 off. So it's a $375 tripod. $75 is a good discount, right?
Yes, it's substantial.
Yeah.
I love these recommendations, and I will. I'm actually intrigued by this Apple Mini thing that you're talking about. I'm not a super tech savvy guy, but hey, I like that it's called an Apple Mini.
Mac Mini. There it is. It's an M4 chip. My MacBook Pro has an M1, but I'm getting it with the M4 Pro chip. So many times
Tony, is that what I need, Tony? I need a second opinion. Is that what I need in this an M4?
Are you sure you want to ask me about Apple stuff? Because I would say no.
Tony's he's a Windows guy. Yeah.
Well, you have a MacBook on your desk, Mark, right?
Right.
Do we know how old it is?
No, I just got a new one. So, but I just got a new one. So I'm pretty up on it now. But look, I don't want to make this about me. I'll offline it with you. But the point is, I am an everyman, and to that extent, it can be.
Well, here's the deal: the iMac is a standalone computer. You've all seen them, and it has half as much power as the Mac Mini does, and that's what really got me. And it has more ports. Now, I may be talking heavily geek talk, but I have a lot of things to plug in, so I need all the
that
space.
Will be, and that Mac Mini will stand alongside your laptop. It will essentially be the processor for. Yeah, okay, got it. All right, I'm a big fan. I continue to be a big fan. PhotoWalks TV, you can find on YouTube. You've grown your audience. I will say to you, you're welcome, because I feel like a lot.
What?
A lot of
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
There you go. All right.
Yeah. You're the best, Mark.
But you can see some of the brilliance that is Jefferson Graham. I mean, I just love his stuff, and it will inspire you to not only take pictures, but to see the world. So it's pretty cool. And if you can't see the world physically, great to see it through pictures. Have a great holiday, pal, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Jefferson Graham, everybody. Love it. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, Tony, I've got to wrap up, I guess. It
is 1 o'clock.
It's incredible that it's 1 o'clock where you are, it's 4 o'clock where I am, and I feel we've done a lot. I've also left a lot out. And the good news is tomorrow I'm right back at it. So, for example, I have a juicy That's Rich segment where some of the wealthiest among us are moving their money, the transactions that might be of interest to you. I also have a juicy Law and Disorder, a couple of big court cases going down, and I'll review those for tomorrow as well. So there's much to do tomorrow, in addition to all of the unfolding madness in Washington, and even on this holiday week, there's all sorts of other stuff going on. I almost yellow carded today one of our new commenters. It was this guy, People's Republic of Santa Monica. It does not matter. She was tied to Sleepy Joe and Corpse Joe. I felt almost like I wanted to yellow card that because of the name calling. But then I realized, well, people do call in our chat Trump like the orange man and stuff like that. So I'm going to let it go. But in a perfect world, I'd rather avoid that. But I don't want to seem too prudish about it, too. You know, my general view is say whatever you want, you know. But then the tonic for any sort of toxic talk comes from our super chatters. Look at Beth. Beth with a $20 super chat to all the Mark Thompson Show folks. Have a great Thanksgiving. It's a $20 super chat. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Can you hear the thank you so much well enough, Tony? Okay,
Sounds fine.
Okay, good.
Chat, does it sound fine? Because what I hear here, through StreamYard on my end, sounds perfect.
Okay, hopefully it's good. But anyway, thank you, Beth Farmer, and you rock, and I appreciate it very, very much. I also thank Daryl Leffler for a $10 super sticker. Hey,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much, Daryl. I love it, and a big shout out.
Big shout out.
Yeah. And I did I mention Peter before? 1912, same as Arizona, and my grandmother through grandma would only be 28. Gosh, I don't remember what this is.
Is that the oldest guy?
Oh, wow. Is that what that is? Yeah. We started the show with
11:15.
the oldest.
Yeah. And he sent two supers, so because he sent it twice. So
Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And big shout out to you.
Big shout out.
Big supporter there in Arizona. This on Kamala Harris. Steve says, I love Kamala Harris, but she tried to run away from the record of the Biden administration instead of embracing and promoting their list of accomplishments and talking it up. And that was the real problem. That's what we addressed in the first half hour. The problem that campaign had was they wanted to both embrace a president who wasn't really popular. I mean, Biden had very low popularity numbers, as you know, but was full of some accomplishments that they felt you could legitimately brag about. I mean, negotiation on pharmacological issues. That is to say, there were 10 different drugs that could be negotiated on. There was the huge infrastructure bill. There was the CHIPS Act. You can have legitimate conversations about everything that was in these bills, and that this was part of this. But he did bring us out of COVID, and he had a list of accomplishments. Again, I might have modified some of those in a perfect world. The compromises that you need to make in Washington are oftentimes really tough to stomach. But that said, she, in what you're implying, she needed to acknowledge that while also somehow suggesting she was different and a gateway to the future. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first half hour. The reason I played for you some of what was being said from the inside the Kamala campaign was they wanted her to individuate, but she also had instincts which were associated with a loyalty to Biden, which was an interesting thing to me. I'd never heard her people actually say that. And so you could only get her to distance herself and the campaign so much from Joe Biden. And that may or may not have been the thing. As you know, I think it probably wasn't, just based on what I've said. You can probably tell. I feel as though there was a lot of other stuff going on. But it was interesting to hear them talk about that nevertheless. And that was just in relation to what Steve was saying. We talked about journalism. We talked about these other things. I feel as though we got everything but this. Trevor Starr in Hollywood with a 1010 super chat says, Mark, any chance of having Kim briefly call in with video from Disneyland tomorrow? I would happily do that. I'll ask her. Sure. She might be able to do that. She's with the kids in Disneyland, and we'll find out. I love that idea. Thank you, Trevor. Yeah. Please don't bug Kim on her vacay.
What?
Well, already it's controversial.
How does the internet work?
Exactly. How does it work? All right.
And Mark,
yes,
Mo
sir.
says the drop audio is good. Thank you, Mo.
Drop audio is good. Thank you, Mo. All right. Well, that's good to know. I have my miniature Dropbox here, so I'm able to.
That's not fake. That's real.
Yeah, I can still have some of these that I normally have. I Thank you all for joining me today. Just you and me, there's a certain intimacy to it that I rather like. Kim is gone all week, but maybe we will get her to call in from Disneyland tomorrow. She's in Southern California in Disneyland. What's that?
I said it's doable.
Yeah, I think it's doable, and she can. It's doable if it's logistically possible for her. Tomorrow,
when you're in line.
It is literally just you and me tomorrow, and a magnificently juicy That's Rich, and also a juicy Law and Disorder, among other things. No Rothman tomorrow, so the audience, and it's me. And I am tempted to do an AMA tomorrow a bit, which is an Ask Me Anything. So we may do that tomorrow as well. So I hope you'll all join us. And as we ramp up to Thanksgiving, Shadow, if you will.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Have a great holiday if we don't talk to you tomorrow, but put us
time.
on
Bye,
tomorrow.
bye.
We will be here live. And until then, everyone, bye-bye.